We'll begin with our report section, and Councilman Murphy has an announcement. Councilman Murphy?
Thank you, Mr. President, and I'll be brief on this. You know, the council recently developed two different authorities, one, the Commercial Development Authority and the Downtown Redevelopment Authority. We will be starting on tomorrow morning taking applications for those two authorities, and the deadline for those will be on the 11th. We'll follow the same process as when we reinstated the IDB board. They will be broken down into sectors of expertise, so folks will apply based upon their sectors of expertise associated with that. If it's the pleasure of the president at the time, and if we are ready, we'll have public discussion and possible reappointment on the 18th, but that'll be a pleasure of our president. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Murphy. I know you've worked very closely with Mr. Knighton to this point to get this process off the ground, and we look forward to working through it. Thank you very much. We'll now ask Mr. Rice to come and update us on the flood report.
Thanks, Mr. President. We've got good, positive movement to report this week in terms of the federal government and the assistance we think will be forthcoming. Fortunately, it looks like we've plateaued. We've got no additional damage reports this week, so we stand at 27 public projects and 390 private property owners who've reported some level of damage. We did receive the federal disaster declaration, which was a little bit unanticipated, but obviously a pleasant surprise. This opens up channels of assistance to the affected private property owners and also to the city itself for the public work that we've had to do that you're all familiar with. We will have sort of a fact sheet forthcoming. That'll be mailed to everyone, all of the 390 property owners who reported private property damage. We'll also, of course, issue a press release and do some work on social media to try to get that word out. There are different streams of assistance, and so we want to be sure that people understand where to go and how they can access different programs. You have an item on your agenda for tonight that you graciously added at the last minute, which is a space use agreement with the U.S. Small Business Administration. They'll actually be opening an assistance center at the Hoover Rec Center in the coming days, as soon as we can get them set up and they'll have 3 field representatives here on site. And they'll be providing assistance. Now, there's a little bit of a misnomer. It is the Small Business Administration, but they also have some very low interest loan programs for private property owners. You don't have to be a business owner to access some of those programs. And more detail will be in the information that we send out to the folks that have experienced damage. But if people have uninsured or uncovered losses, there are some programs that they can access funds through the Small Business Administration. So there's a lot that can be done online at disasterassistance.gov, and then you see the phone numbers listed there as well. But we do anticipate some people will need some in-person assistance with filling out the various applications. And so the SBA Center will be set up there. Rec Center is accessible and also is open during the extended hours that the SBA Assistance Center plans to be open, including half a day on Saturday. So there'll be a lot of opportunities for people to get help with that. Again, we have completed site visits at all of the current damage reports that we have. This slide won't change for quite some time. We have that one pending project, and we're waiting on some costing work, and that's a little bit more complex than we thought it might be. So, but we do have one continues to be underway, and 25 are already complete of the authorized public projects. This is the same list that you've seen before. It's the one there at Deodara at Star Lake that's taking us a little bit more time to get some costing information. We'll get that one out of the gate as fast as we can. We added a little bit of information to this slide. Nothing has changed in terms of the projects, the allocation, and the appropriation and the allocation that's been made so far on those 27 public projects. But on the contracted engineering support, we added a third column just so you could see what's actually been paid out. So we do not know if all of the $309,000 appropriation will be needed or not. As of right now, we've only received invoicing for a little over 10% of that. We know that there are more invoices forthcoming. So we'll have a final number on what we've actually paid out. And our overtime, the bottom figure there under other city expenditures has remained somewhat stable at just over $44,000. So with that, I'd answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Mr. Rice? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very good news. I know I speak for the council and how excited we were when we learned that the federal government declared us a disaster area. We'll get to public comments at the end of the meeting, if that's okay. Thank you, Mr. Rice.
Thank you.
We'll now move to our regular agenda, and we did not have a work session last Thursday night, so we will take each of these items one by one and ask the responsible department head to come up and give us a brief introduction of the item before we vote and discuss. Each item will include time for public comment should anyone be here and wish to speak about any particular item. We'll begin with item number 6, approval of minutes.
Mr. President, I move for approval of the minutes without reading.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 7 is resolution number 6599-21A. Mr. Corley.
There'll be a public hearing for this. This resolution amends the resolution approving and assenting to the declaration of a vacation.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution number 6599-21A.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Before we get to the public hearing, Ms. Dickerson, it's my understanding this was a change of wording in one of the resolutions we passed at our last meeting.
That's correct, yes.
This does require a public hearing, as Mr. Corley indicated. We'll begin by opening that public hearing and ask if there are any members of the council who wish to have a question or comment about this item. Any member of the public who would like to speak about this particular item? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing. We have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 8, resolution number 6620-22. Mr. Corley.
This resolution approves the submission of the City of Hoover's grant application for the Assistance to Firefighters Grant.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution number 6620-22.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Bentley, Chief. There you are in the back corner. Come on down.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is the authorization for us to apply for the grant with your approval. And you have the packet in front of you, what it's for. It's for the replacement of 3 district supervisor vehicles at the cost of $233,475. If awarded the grant, the city's portion would be $21,225. And so we're just asking permission to submit this to the Assistance for Firefighters Grant.
Any questions from the members on to the chief? Thank you, sir. We have a motion and second. Any questions or comments from the public? Hearing and seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Item number 9, resolution number 6621-22. Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mayor Brocato to execute an agreement with the University of Alabama Health Services Foundation on behalf of emergency medicine.
Mr. President, I move for resolution, for approval of resolution number 6621-22.
Second.
Motion and a second. Chief.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, this is an agreement that you passed back in 2019 between the city and the University of Alabama Health Services Foundation for emergency medicine, and it's our medical director. It's the cost of that. The only thing that changed in the agreement was the amount that we're paying them. We started at 2019 at $15,000 per year, and we've raised that to $20,000 per year, and we wanted to reflect that in the agreement.
Any questions for Chief Bentley? Any questions from members of the public? We have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 10, thank you, Chief. Item number 10, resolution number 6622-22. Mr. Corley.
This resolution accepts 3 special warranty deeds provided to the city by P.R. Wilburn, LLC, S.B. Dev Corp., and Fleming Partners, LLC.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution number 6622-22.
Second.
That's a motion and a second. Mr. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. President. We all are aware that we're very fortunate in Hoover to have a company that just repeatedly steps to the plate as a great corporate citizen. They do a tremendous amount of development here, but they do a tremendous amount of benevolence here as well. And tonight's something we've waited on a long time, and that's acceptance of special warranty deeds on parcels of property that are in addition to other things they've already given this city, like the mountain bike park and other very important recreational amenities. when strung together, I believe it's a 130-acre linear park that will run along the Cahaba River. And so many times we hear about development along the Cahaba, and that's a critical concern. This is a company that's elected not to do that, and they've developed away from the Cahaba, which is an irreplaceable resource, and they're giving us 130 acres of parkland that will stretch along the Cahaba River. We have the opportunity to connect this through partnerships with other entities like Freshwater Land Trust, et cetera, to create a trail network that will extend even beyond that property that we will own. Probably the most unique thing about this is they're not just giving us the land. This is a turnkey donation. They've already built a pavilion, an outdoor educational center, and public restrooms and a parking area. And there are more amenities to come that they will build and turn over to us. And I've never heard of that before. We've all heard of land donations, and then the government has the burden of developing them and maintaining them. We'll actually receive a turnkey developed recreational amenity that I think is going to be a game changer for this city. It's not just for the people who live in the immediate vicinity, but this will be entered into our recreational inventory, and I think it'll change the face of how we enjoy nature in the city of Hoover. We've got more frontage, more Cahaba River frontage than any other city in the state of Alabama. And this is the first opportunity for us to maximize that in a responsible way and use it as a true amenity for residents and for visitors alike. So with that, I'd like to recognize Mr. Jonathan Belcher, Mr. Dwight Sandlin, and their team. No, you're just pointing at Jonathan. Okay, we're only going to recognize John. Dwight said he ain't getting up. So, and they've got a brief presentation about their project.
Thank you, Mr. Rice, Mr. President, and the rest of the council members. I appreciate the opportunity on the behalf of Signature Homes to talk a little bit about tonight about Fleming Park on the Cahaba, which we chose the name simply because Mr. Fleming owned this property for many, many decades. As you know, Fleming Parkway is the access there that connects to this property as you pass by Bumpus Middle School. So this is an overview of Stadium Trace Parkway from the Lake Wilburn community back to Buccaneer Drive as you access the high school. And centered on the project, you'll see Fleming Parkway, which goes in front of Bumpus. And as you pass through Bumpus and go beyond the entrance to our Abingdon by the River community, you'll find the entrance to Fleming Park. This is a larger version of it. The park itself already has completed approximately 5 miles of hiking and biking trails, which provides great access to the Cahaba River. With the sidewalks that already exist on Buccaneer Drive, you also have easy access from the existing sports complexes we have. I think there would be an opportunity to extend beyond the playground that we have there next to the soccer and lacrosse fields, where we could add some minor trails to connect to the northern entrance that we have on Buccaneer Drive for the project. But we've got ample parking there on the north end, and then we also have some gravel parking there at the entrance that we've created that's on the pavilion that Mr. Rice spoke of earlier. There's one really large post oak tree that exists today next to this pavilion, which is not pictured. The tree's probably 6 or 7 feet in circumference, 75, maybe 85-year-old tree that's there. So we thought post oak would be a fitting name for the pavilion. I would think the pavilion will really serve a lot of different members of the community, whether it be the surrounding residents, children from school classes who want to go visit, those who want to hit the trails. It's just a great meeting and destination point. In the background, you see there's also 2 restrooms there on site. The site is complete. The only thing we haven't put is seating. We would just want to talk with the Parks and Recs about what type of seating we'd like to have, because again, it can accommodate whether it be a school classroom or it can just serve as a meeting space. There's a lot of different uses for it. And I think you could, easily have 30 to 40 people there under the pavilion, just from an education standpoint, pretty easily. As we move beyond this and the balance of the 130 acres that Mr. Rice was referring to, on the right-hand side, you can see the Post Oak Pavilion location. Over the coming year, we'll be adding a bridge that will be constructed and cross over the creek that is the outfall from Wilburn Lake. And that will connect to those areas that are designated as future trails. And as you can see on the bottom left-hand side, there's a little area of the Cahaba that has a little connection that creates an island there, which we think is going to be a fantastic spot for a future, hopefully a future Blueway point as part of the Cahaba River Blueway. I've shared this with Ms. Beth Stewart of the Cahaba River Society, and she is aware of it, and we're going to work with them on the construction of that so that when we come back for this final donation of the park, we'll have it ready to go. And again, have a ready-made complete park that will have over 3 miles of river frontage that's all easily accessible. We've performed the mitigation work over this entire 3 miles, which means we've worked with an environmental engineer to remove all the invasive species, replanted indigenous species that are there, and we'll work for 10 years to maintain those to make sure they're established and the natural habitat can be in place there. So when you go back and look at the overview, what's fun to see is you go back to early 2017 when we introduced the 11th Amendment of Trace Crossings, which, for those of you who are on the council, they know that was not an easy amendment to go through, but this was the start of it. And at that time, the Hoover Met Complex consisted of 175 acres. You had the Hoover Met that's been there since the mid-'80s, and then we had the vision for the Finley Center and the vision for the athletic fields that serve so many different sports that are there. And then now today, that is, those items are complete, and the Met Complex has grown to 215 acres. We've added the mountain bike park, which is close to 75 acres, and now we have this area that's about 130 that'll be added to it. So it's just fun seeing as we near the completion of this in just 4 short years, where now we've got over 400 acres of public park that exists today that didn't exist before. So really excited about that. We're grateful to be able to present it to the city and look forward to many years of use of it.
Thank you, Mr. Belcher. Any comments or questions from our members? Mr. Shaw?
Mr. President, I would just say, that vote was, for those of us here, was pretty controversial. There was a lot of positive things, a lot of negative things that we had to go through for that. But you look at the preserve where we have 350 acres. Mr. Martin, there's about 350 acres of land, and you look at the foresight that our predecessors had to provide to put those plans into place, and then you see some things like this. And if you read social media, you would think that Hoover has no trees. It's all pavement. We hate trees. We don't want them. But I hope as these things come online and as our kids and our grandkids and everybody can enjoy them, people will see that the city is committed to green space and is committed to public use of land like this and working with private developers, very generous private developers who are willing to cast a vision like this. It's exciting to see, and I hope one day to, if I can lose some weight and get in a canoe, maybe go down the Cahaba River one day at one of these facilities. But it's exciting to see with so much controversy working through some of these issues. Exciting to see these things come to fruition. And so I'm proud of our city for working with developers and coming up with stuff like this. And hopefully councils down the road will be able to, or down the river will be able to look at these things and look back and be appreciative for what was put in place. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. I would add to that, and the mayor and I have talked that as much as, like Mr. Shaw said, we have used and worked with folks to have what I think is probably, as a ratio of total square miles in our city, I need to fact check this. I'm willing to bet the city of Hoover has more park space than any city in central Alabama, and we're adding to that. And I think this is a catalyst and a spark for what the mayor and I have talked about. As good a job as we've done, we've never capitalized on the shoreline of the Cahaba River that we could. And this will be a spark and a catalyst to help us do that. So to Mr. Sandlin, to Mr. Belcher, on behalf of 93,000 residents of the city of Hoover, thank y'all so much for what, not only this, but all you've done for us in terms of park space and green space. We're very grateful.
Thank you very much.
Thank y'all. Any other questions or comments from the council? Any questions or comments from the public? We have a motion and second for approval of the resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it, and the motion carries. Move to item number 8, resolution number 6620-22. I'm sorry. No, item number 11. Resolution 662322. Mr. Corley.
This resolution amends the budget for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2022, as shown on Exhibit A attached to the resolution.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution number 6623-22.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Bolt.
Thank you, council. So what this does is we are taking some, we're actually not adding any money to the budget. We are moving money around. So we are taking some part-time positions that we've not, and some temporary positions that we've not filled for quite some time, and moving those into a position for a senior or an admin assistant senior. And I know the budget amendment says city clerk's office. That's not for the city clerk's office. It's for risk management. And Mr. Rice will talk about those specifics. But moving that money around actually saves us about $879.
Any questions or comments for Ms. Bolt? I think Mr. Rice will add some commentary.
Yes, sir, briefly, Mr. President. We had a three-person risk management operation for many years, and several years ago, we saw the opportunity to consolidate that. We eliminated the lower-level position in risk because of the level of experience that folks had in that department. In terms of succession planning, we have our risk manager who is, I think she would agree that she has more years behind her than she has ahead of her, and we want to be able to prepare junior staff to move forward. We also have a staff member who's facing an extended leave here in the next few months. Good news, I'll let her make the announcement, but she's going to be out a little while. So we want to have somebody in place to start to train and take some of the workload during that absence, but also be in the chute and be prepared to move up and move forward as the years go by. So this, as Ms. Bolt noted, this is a reallocation. We're not asking for new money. We're asking to take some vacant positions off the books and reuse those funds to beef up our risk management operation.
Any questions for Mr. Rice? Hearing no questions from the body, are there any questions or comments from members of the public? We have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Item number 12, resolution number 6624-22. Mr. Corley.
This resolution authorizes Mayor Brocato to execute an agreement with the United States Small Business Administration.
Mr. President, I move for approval of resolution number 6624-22.
Second.
Motion and a second. Mr. Rice.
Yes, sir, this is just what I referenced in the flooding report. We'll allow the SBA to put a kind of a temporary field office for a few weeks in the boardroom at the Hoover Rec Center. And we worked with the Park and Rec Director. We'll make the community room available for any Park and Rec board meetings that they need to have in the meantime. And the hours of operation, we believe, will be 8 to 6, Monday through Friday, and 8 to noon on Saturday. So it was good to have it in a location that's open for business, that has city staff, and that has some parking available. No cost, no money changes hands either way, and when they have completed their mission, that terminates the agreement.
Any questions for Mr. Rice? I know we got this agreement late. Mr. Rice, does it have an end date on it, or will that be determined by traffic in and out of the office?
I think they put about a 6-week term on it, but that is subject to extension depending on the volume of business that they're doing. They don't anticipate seeing a lot of people in person. We think a lot of people will use the online portal, but we did want to have, they offered, and we wanted to have agents physically available to assist folks who might not have internet access or might need some assistance.
Very good. Any other comments from the body on this item? Any comments or questions from members of the public about this particular item? Hearing and seeing none, we have a motion and a second for approval. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Rice. That brings us to item number 13. This is a first reading, and we'll set a public hearing for this item for Monday, January 18th. This will be a first reading. No public hearing or discussion will be had tonight. It's ordinance number 22-2547. Mr. Corley.
This ordinance approves the request of Darren Boykin on behalf of Walmart to amend certain conditions placed on the zoning of the property at 2780 John Hawkins Parkway, Highway 150, as set forth in Exhibit B to the ordinance.
Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. President, this comes to you with a positive recommendation from our Planning and Zoning Commission. The property would remain Zone C2. However, there are a couple of conditions that would be modified that were placed on the zoning of the property back in 1999. The first condition being that the delivery times would be adjusted to where Walmart could handle deliveries starting at 4 a.m., going all the way to 10 p.m. One of the primary reasons this was brought to us from Walmart was that in order for their fresh items to be delivered in a timely fashion for customers that come in the morning, they needed the adjustment ahead a couple of hours. The current condition has deliveries starting at 7 in the morning, and that is not ideal to get the fresh produce, the fresh items out on display for customers that come in the morning time. It's usually a day later before those customers can have access to those goods. So that is one of the conditions that is set to be amended. The Planning Commission also recommends the removal of one of the conditions originally placed on the zoning of the property, and that was a prohibition on drive-through restaurants. We do note that should the council approve the removal of this condition prohibiting drive-through restaurants would still need to obtain a conditional use approval and would go back before the Planning Commission and this body for final consideration. Again, the property would remain Zone C2 with all of the remaining conditions placed on it in ordinance number 99-1701. Those would remain intact.
We'll entertain any questions from the body for Mr. Martin.
Mr. President, I just want one point of clarification. There was some discussion back and forth on this, but this only affects, that's not for the whole parcel there, the whole Walmart parcel. It's just the parcel in the middle where Walmart sits?
That's correct. Just Lot 2 of the shopping center, which houses Walmart and a considerable amount of the parking field.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin.
Mr. President,
Yes, sir.
this is probably a question for Wendy. Can I get a copy of ordinance number 99-1701 by email? Okay, thank you.
Yes, you can.
Mr. Martin, that parking field you're describing, are there any current out parcel buildings in that highlighted section?
No, sir. There are a couple of carve-outs that have buildings on them. But what you see, the primary portion of the frontage, let's see if I've got it. Okay. This is the primary parking field in front of Walmart that extends all the way out to Highway 150, the former Roadhouse Steak Restaurant located there. And then we also have a couple of other out parcels to the west with the former PNC Bank location on that third and westernmost out parcel. And then to the east, there's another bank located on an out parcel that's carved out. And then this is another section of parking field on this Lot 2. There's some additional parking at Academy Sports further east.
I guess I'm asking you to speculate here, and if that's unfair, you're welcome to say so, but the reason they're asking for the removal of the drive-through restaurant prohibition must mean that there's intent to put one somewhere.
There is the possibility of some of that parking field being carved out.
I see.
For a restaurant. The parking field, just from my review, my being on site looking, seems underutilized, particularly that portion towards the Academy Sports side of the site. That is probably the least utilized portion of the parking field that Walmart owns. And so there has been some contemplation of an applicant coming at some point to have a subdivision and an out parcel development.
I see. Very good. Any other questions for Mr. Martin? Thank you, sir. We will come back on the 18th and have a public hearing on that item. Item number 14, we'll also set a public hearing for January 18th for this item, but we'll begin with a first reading tonight, resolution number 661922. Mr. Corley.
This resolution approves the request of Mr. David Messina, representing the Universal Church, for a conditional use approval so that a church may be located at 3133 Lorna Road, Suite 109.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Martin.
Yes, Mr. President, this particular location comes to, or this application comes to you with a positive recommendation from the Planning Commission. There are a couple of conditions that are attached to their recommendation, and that being that the building satisfy fire and building code requirements pertaining to ingress, egress, and fire suppression for an assembly use. And secondly, that the hours of assembly use be limited to times when 25% of the shopping center businesses are closed, except for Wednesday evenings after 5 p.m. and all day on Sunday. Some of the thought that went into that particular condition, it was known to staff that there have been some complaints in the past about overcrowding at that particular shopping center when you had large gatherings in this space. Of course, it has been vacant, and now there's an applicant attempting to place an assembly use at this location. So we viewed the conditional use as a good and proper time to try to address that issue before it becomes an issue as best as we can. So also, again, with that first condition, want to make sure that the building is up to speed on all of its building and fire code compliance as well.
Is the applicant here tonight? Okay. Any questions or comments for Mr. Martin? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Martin. We will have a public hearing on January 18th and potential vote that night for that. That brings us to the end of our agenda. We'll now open it up to any council comments. Hearing none. Any members of the public like to speak tonight? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Cherie Beavers, and I was here on the first meeting we had after the flooding. And I did not see our address or street up on the listing for having any construction done. I live on South Sanders, and a lot of that is where some of the flooding starts, mainly down on Southland Drive. Our creek runs straight through there. I have a lot of flood damage that goes all the way back until 2014. I have pictures. I missed the deadline on the 20th to get my pictures in. I emailed Mr. McKay, Keith McKay, several times asking him if I could still turn in my photos. I never heard back from him. And I have a lot of flooding which occurred on 3 times last year and twice this year, especially on October the 6th. I've never been contacted on anything that is going to be done. Our road was decaying. It was starting to fall in. They did come out and pave it, and they've done this before, and it's not going to hold up. It was really bad. We had a sinkhole probably bigger than I was. That's how bad it was, and the road was just chipping away in this. A lot of that is due to the pond that is across the street from us. That water comes from their driveway into my front yard, goes down the driveway, and just literally floods my whole entire front yard. I haven't had any feedback on any of the emails that I've sent. And I was just wondering if there is anything that the council plans on doing to South Sanders.
I know we said South Sanders. Did we get her address, Ms. Dickerson?
I did not.
May we get your address, please, ma'am?
641 South
641
Sanders
South
Road.
Mr. Rice, could we have someone to follow up with her, or perhaps you have an answer tonight on some of these questions?
Are you hearing that? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
sir.
partially on this. We do have a project that was recently completed at 636 South Sanders, so it sounds like that's close to you. I don't know the details of that project, but Mr. Reeves, are you in a position to follow up with her tonight and explain that project to her, and then maybe get her connected with your staff so that we can evaluate her situation?
Yes, we'll be glad to talk with her tomorrow.
Okay, that'd be fantastic. We'll have more details for you tomorrow, but Mr. Reeves is our engineer, and he'll be putting you in touch with the right folks.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Beavers.
Oh, thank you for opening this up today.
Yes, ma'am. Sir, you'd like to come forward? If you could get your name and address, you recognize for 3 minutes, please.
My name is Barry Vickery. I live at 780 Cahaba River Estates. I just want to point it out that I provided council members, the mayor, and the city attorney some legal documents concerning the Walmart request. One of them is a settlement agreement that was signed by Walmart and notarized concerning those restrictions. Another is Judge Smallwood's order establishing those restrictions. And I've put about 50 pages of a court reporter's report that dealt with each one of those restrictions from that 1999 meeting. And I'm requesting that y'all review that prior to the next hearing when we bring this up on the second reading. And that's it.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Vickery. Yes, ma'am. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's okay if I give y'all this?
Sure.
KT Thomas, 1426 Scout Trace. The handout is a transcription of pertinent portions of the November 15th and December 6th council meetings. At the December 6th meeting, Mr. McClinton said something illuminating, and I quote, "I do appreciate your passion. I know what it is like to be on that side too, to talk to the council." Are we on different sides? Certainly, we share some of the same values. As residents of Hoover, those values might include our safety, our health, confident investments in our homes and our community. On December 6th, in reference to the $60,000 repairs labeled Preserve Parkway, Mr. Lyda said, and again I quote, he, meaning Mr. Reeves, knew exactly where it was. We knew exactly where it was, but there was no address. So just to clarify, that we knew where it was on Preserve Parkway. I believe that's the one you're talking about. On November 15th, Mr. Reeves said, in reference to Resolution 6596-21, again, I quote, "Preserve Parkway, we have damages to the shoulder, the sidewalk, a storm pipe going down the hill. You have to bear with me on that location because it's right next to the preserve. It's hard to give an exact location, but I've got pictures of it if anyone would like to see it." On December 6th, I said, and I quote, "Last city council meeting, y'all agreed to $60,000 when it couldn't be explained where it was or what it was. Preserve Parkway is 3.3 miles long from John Hawkins Parkway to Patton Chapel Road. Based on the cones that appeared a week or so ago, the repairs appear to be in the 0.8 of a mile on Preserve Parkway that is actually in Moss Rock Preserve. The cones were on the culvert furthest from the intersection of Preserve Parkway and Sulphur Springs Road. So was it possible to give a more exact location? For example, 1/7 of a mile from Sulphur Springs on Preserve Parkway?" Finally, Mr. Lyda said, "But I want to clarify, to allow people to come up here and just make statements that are false. He told you where it is, it's okay, there was just no direct address." So my question is, was my statement false? Many things are not true or false, they're not black or white. They're a matter of judgment. If we're willing to accept that 3.3 miles of a road is an adequate description, or in your words, an exact location, then I was wrong. Respectfully, in my judgment, more accuracy is necessary and desirable, and thus I was not false. was my statement about the nature of the problem faults. In order for you to see what I see, I provided you photos that are on Preserve Parkway between .6 and .7 miles from Sulphur Springs going
Thank you, ma'am.
toward
The time is
that
up.
jump.
We've got the
Okay.
document here. We'll be happy to review that.
All righty.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else like to speak tonight? Yes, ma'am.
Rebecca Ritchie, 4911 Twin Pine Circle. Our big problem is the stormwater pipes that run through our property that come down from Magnolia Grove. There is a big problem with Magnolia Grove. I have right here a letter from Alabama Engineering Company to the city of Hoover. It says, the principal outlet from the pond is a 24-inch diameter concrete pipe with a 4 square foot riser structure upstream of the pipe. The emergency spillway is a 4 foot wide rip-rap line channel across and down the embankment. And then it gives all these statistics about storm and water rates and everything. And then at the end it says, we have noted, however, there's an existing 18-inch diameter pipe on the residential lot below this pond. This pipe appears to have been installed by the homeowner or builder, but is smaller and than would be necessary to carry peak storm flows. Now, October 6th was definitely a storm peak. And that's not the only one we've had. Since 2014, when all this started, we've probably had at least 6 or 8 times that top has been blown off of the stormwater sewer. Right here, I didn't have time to make a lot of pictures. There's 2 pictures. You can see where Magnolia Grove, it was all clear cut. Then here's where the retention pond is, and here's that wonderful spillway that goes directly to the houses. If y'all want to pass it down, I'm sorry I didn't have time to do it, but that's the first one, that's the second one. So all that water that comes out of there comes directly into our property. Now, the city okayed that. It was, this was Robert Easley from Alabama Engineering that wrote that letter. But the city obviously approved for that to be done at Magnolia Grove. And I don't understand why we're supposed to be responsible for something that a developer and the city agreed on doing that's obviously not correct. So I wish that something would be done, because our neighbor, Mr. Glass, and us have already spent over $40,000 or $50,000 trying to remedy this situation.
Ms. Ritchie, thank you for being back. We appreciate that very much.
Appreciate y'all thinking about it.
Any other members of the public like to speak? Come on down, sir.
Yes, I have really a question.
Yes, yes, sir. If we could get your name and address at the microphone for the record. Yeah, if we could get you at the microphone, Mr. Askins, that'd be great. Please, sir.
Yeah, I am a property owner in Cahaba River Estates at 651 Cahaba River Estates. My name is Scott Gaskins. And I have a question as to the Walmart development. I'd like a clarification. If the proposed changes to the restrictions are only to lot number 2. If so, I'd like a map of lot number 1 and 2 and 3, or however many lots there are in there, so that we can understand the proposed restrictions or changes to restrictions. Understanding what we're up against in the neighborhood back there is actually a big part of it for us. Also, whether or not this opens the door to future changes in those restrictions and further changes, because, you know, once the restrictions are pierced, our concern is that all of the restrictions will be thrown out, like the baby with the bathwater. And I don't really think that's, at least I hope that's not the intent of city council at this point, to throw out all of the restrictions. Because those restrictions were put there for a reason, and that's part of the reason why we have invested in property back there, because it's a slightly different way of life than the hustle and bustle of everything else. So there is a little sanctity to that. And my son has recently bought a piece of property back in there as well. So we're both building new homes back in there, and we'd like for it to stay the way it is. But really would like some sort of clarification on what the proposed changes are and what the specific piece of property is that those changes might occur to if it was approved on the 18th.
Mr. Gaskins, the Exhibit B, I think it is, lists exactly the proposed changes to the
Okay, and
ordinance.
I'm sorry, I got here late. I don't
Yeah,
have a copy.
we'll be glad to get you a copy of that. It's in our packet that's
Okay.
published online. It's a fair question about the lots. He asked about the outline, what we called Lot 2. Is there a way to diagram that entire property and show one? We assume there's a 1 and a 3?
That was pulled directly from the plat
Okay.
for that shopping center, so, yes, the plat shows all of the lots.
Could we get Mr. Gaskins' email address and share that with him? I think that sooner rather than later so they can be prepared
I can write it up for you.
for the 18th. Anything further, Mr. Gaskins, we can help
No,
you with?
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions or comments? All right. Yes, sir.
I'm Joel Kelly, 109 Highland Crest Parkway. I was wondering if we have any kind of estimated time about the repairs or the help or whatever the 390 individuals can look for in, at our homes. I know you have 27, I think it was, projects that y'all were working on. What about the 390 of us that had damage to our property because of, as others have mentioned, the storm drains, the water coming through there, washing, eroding our property and causing, I've got an erosion that you could put your car into. And I just wondered if there's any period of time when we can look for answers to any of that.
Mr. Kelly, it's a fair question. I think it's more of a question, and Mr. Rice confirmed this, but I think that's going to be more of a question for FEMA now that it's been declared a disaster area, and the city council trying to make a prediction on how quick the federal government's going to move would be very difficult. Mr. Rice, can you offer any other guidance on that?
Now what we need to do is make sure that you're in a dialogue with FEMA and/or the Small Business Administration to see what economic assistance you qualify for. But then it will be up to each property owner to contract for those repairs to take place. So the city can't come out and do that work on private property. But our role at this point is to connect you with the federal programs that could determine your eligibility and provide you with funding, and then you would hire a contractor or whoever needed to come out and make those repairs.
Is this funding a loan?
There are a lot of different programs. I'm not familiar with how each one of them works. Those are all administered by the federal government. So what we need to do is connect you with them. So I'll be happy to talk to you afterward to make sure you know how to do that. Were you one of those 390 that filed a damage claim?
Yeah.
Okay, then you'll be getting a letter from us that outlines all the different ways to make contact with the federal government. Okay?
Yeah, I was just wondering about, you said the city's not gonna have any involvement on our private property, but it's the public, the water going through those pipes that's what damaged our private
Well, that's
property.
a commonly held belief, but state law does not allow us to go on private property and make those repairs. And now that it's been a federally declared disaster, as the president mentioned, now it's time for us to get you connected with the right agency at the federal government that can help pay for it.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I think Matt went through 5481 Scout Creek Drive, and I think we should make sure this all gets very well understood. So you have a curb inlet for stormwater from a street, and it runs through somebody's property or has an easement between two properties that feeds a creek or something like that. That's infrastructure that drains stormwater for the city from the streets. And I think many homeowners would be enlightened to learn that the city has no intention of maintaining that infrastructure. So we should get that out on the table, if that's the case, that none of that infrastructure is going to be maintained by the city, and that the city has no responsibility, even though they approve the plans for that stormwater infrastructure, and in some cases have repaired and replaced it. So is that the case?
This isn't going to be a Q&A about
Okay.
infrastructure. So if you're looking for that, you're at the wrong place.
Okay, I'll just put it out there that, residents should be warned that it sounds like the city is saying they're not going to repair stormwater infrastructure that traverses private property, even though that's for the good of the city and the residents of the city. And that they are going to be responsible for replacing that. And they may not replace it, and there may be damage to city infrastructure such as Sulphur Springs Road, which we already have seen. So, fair enough.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. President, if I could add one thing to that. Sure. I think one of the issues with turning this into a kind of public Q&A forum is for all 300 plus cases we have, there are 300 different situations. There are different places where they are. There's some are on public right of way, some are on private property. It'd be very hard to get into a back and forth of specific cases and things like that here, because what applies to one case might not apply to another. I think the best solution is to do what we've been doing. We have a great process the city has put up with to have on a case-by-case basis each one evaluated. And if it's on right-of-way, then we'll look at that. If it's on private property, if a FEMA applies, I think that's the best process for getting those answers. The engineers, that's what they're spending a lot of their time on, is looking at these cases. Getting into a Q&A here back and forth would it'd get confusing, because every situation is unique and different. And I'm not kidding when I say 300 plus, each one has a different set of circumstances to them, and this is just not the forum to discuss individual cases like that. So, thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
I'm James Sasser. I'm the HOA president for Cobb River Estates. I promise this is the last person from
Can we get your address, please, Mr. Sasser?
1146 Cobb River Estates.
Thank you.
Real quick, I just wanted to add there is ongoing litigation for the Walmart case as far as the zoning. That's going to be going on this week, and potential, just to let y'all know, the results of that could affect the January 18th. So obviously we'll let you know the results of that as we find those out. So just FYI.
Thank you, Mr. Sasser.
Thank you.
Any others? I'll ask again. Hearing and seeing none, we're adjourned.